Get ready for a night of terror as we delve into the most chilling horror stories. From haunted houses to supernatural entities, we'll explore the darkest corners of fear. But we want to hear from you. Share your own terrifying tales in the comments below. Have you ever experienced something that left you shaken? Let us know, and we might feature your story in our next video. Join us as we uncover the secrets that lie in the shadows. And remember, the darkness is always watching. The Cursed Foundation. As we pulled into the driveway of our new home, my wife Rachel and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The house was everything we had dreamed of: spacious, modern, and perfectly situated in a quiet suburban neighborhood. We had spent years saving and planning for this moment, and finally, we were ready to start our new life. The first few weeks were blissful. We settled into our routines, explored the local area, and started to make friends with our neighbors. But as time passed, subtle signs of trouble began to emerge. Rachel fell ill with a persistent flu that seemed to linger, and I started to experience strange, unexplained aches and pains. Our finances, once stable, began to unravel as unexpected expenses piled up. At first, we dismissed it as the usual stress of moving to a new place. But as the misfortunes continued to mount, we realized that something was amiss. Tools would go missing, and strange noises could be heard in the night. The house seemed to be shifting and creaking, as if it was alive and watching us. One evening, as we were preparing dinner, a loud crash echoed from the living room. We rushed in to find that a vase had fallen from the shelf, shattering into 100 pieces on the floor. It was as if an invisible hand had pushed it. Rachel was the first to suggest that the house might be haunted. She had always been sensitive to the supernatural, and now she was convinced that our home was cursed. I was skeptical, but as the occurrences grew more frequent and intense, I began to wonder if she was right. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, we started to research the history of our property. We spoke to neighbors, scoured local records, and even hired a historian to help us uncover the secrets of our land. And then, we found it. A tragic event had occurred on our property decades ago. A family had been torn apart by a brutal crime, leaving behind a legacy of pain and suffering. The spirits of those wronged, it seemed, were seeking vengeance on anyone who dared to inhabit the land. As we delved deeper into the history, we discovered that the tragedy had been covered up, hidden from the public eye. But the spirits knew, and they were determined to make us pay for our ignorance. One night, as we sat in our living room, we felt a presence around us. The air seemed to thicken, and the shadows on the walls began to twist and writhe like living things. We knew then that we were not alone in the house. Rachel started to experience vivid dreams, dreams that seemed all too real. She would see the family that had been torn apart, their faces twisted in agony as they relived the tragedy over and over. And she would see us, trapped in the same cycle of pain and suffering. I tried to reassure her, to tell her that it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But deep down, I knew that she was right. The house was cursed, and we were caught in its grasp. As the days turned into weeks, the occurrences grew more intense. Doors would slam shut on their own, and the sound of footsteps could be heard in the night. We were trapped in a living nightmare, with no escape from the malevolent force that haunted our home. And then one evening, we received a visit from a local medium. She was an old woman with a kind face and a deep understanding of the supernatural. She listened to our story, her eyes filled with compassion, and then she spoke. "The spirits are not just seeking vengeance," she said. "They are trying to warn you. This land is cursed, and you must leave before it's too late." We knew then that we had to act. We couldn't stay in a house that was haunted by the spirits of the dead. But as we packed our bags and prepared to leave, we realized that it might already be too late. The house seemed to be exerting a strange influence over us, drawing us back into its grasp. We were trapped, caught in a cycle of fear and dread that seemed impossible to escape. As we drove away from the house, I looked back in the rearview mirror. The house stood alone, its windows staring out like empty eyes, and I knew that we would never be free from its curse. The The spirits of the dead would always be there, watching and waiting, and one day, they would come for us again. As I look back on that experience, I realize that the house was never ours. It was always a place of darkness, a place where the spirits of the dead lingered, seeking vengeance on the living. And now I am left with the haunting question: what secrets do the old houses hold, and when will they come for us again? The days that followed were a blur. We tried to move on, to leave the house and its horrors behind, but we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the spirits were still out there, waiting for us. And then one night, we received a package in the mail. Inside, we found a photograph of our old house, its windows staring out like empty eyes. The message was simple: you will never be free. We knew then that we were doomed. The house had claimed us, and we would soon join the spirits of the dead in their eternal cycle of pain and suffering. As I write these final words, I am alone in a motel room, the shadows closing in around me like a shroud. I know that soon I will be gone, consumed by the horror that lurks in that cursed house. And when I am, the world will forget me, leaving behind only the faintest hint of my existence. But I hope that someone will find this story, will read it, and understand the terror that lies hidden in the forgotten places of our world. For in those houses, time has forgotten nothing, and the secrets that lie hidden will haunt us forever. The disappearing colony. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dense forest. Dr. Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her brow, her eyes fixed on the peculiar artifact in her hands. It was unlike anything she'd seen before. A small, intricately carved wooden figurine that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "Hey, Mark, come take a look at this," she called out to her colleague. Dr. Mark Thompson emerged from his tent, his weathered face etched with fatigue. For weeks, their team had been excavating this remote site deep in the Appalachian wilderness. What had started as a routine dig had quickly become the archaeological find of the century. "What have you got there?" Mark asked, squinting in the fading light. Sarah handed him the figurine. "I found near the edge of the settlement. It doesn't match any known Native American or colonial styles." Mark turned the object over in his hands, his expression growing more perplexed by the second. "This is strange. The craftsmanship is incredible, but there's something off about it. Almost as if..." A blood-curdling scream cut through the air, sending a chill down their spines. Sarah and Mark exchanged alarmed glances before sprinting towards the source of the sound. They found Lisa, one of their graduate students, standing at the edge of the clearing, her face pale with shock. "There," she stammered, pointing towards the tree line. "I saw something. It wasn't human." Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, Lisa. Probably just a bear or..." "No," Lisa interrupted, her voice rising with hysteria. "It was watching me. Its eyes, they glowed." Sarah felt a knot forming in her stomach. Over the past few days, several team members had reported similar sightings. She had dismissed them as stress-induced hallucinations, but now she wasn't so sure. As night fell, the team huddled around the campfire, the atmosphere thick with tension. Sarah cleared her throat, addressing the group. "I think it's time we discuss what we've found here." She produced a leather-bound journal they had unearthed earlier that week. This belonged to the colony's leader. The entries stop abruptly on October 31st, 1638. The last entry mentions shadows that walk and eyes in the dark. A murmur rippled through the group. Mark leaned forward, his voice low. "That's not all. We've carbon-dated some of the artifacts. They're much older than we initially thought. Some date back over 10,000 years. "But that's impossible," Lisa interjected. "The first European settlements in this region weren't until the 17th century. Sarah nodded grimly. "Exactly. Whatever was here, it wasn't just a colonial settlement, and I think it's still here." As if on cue, a low, guttural growl emanated from the forest. The team froze, their eyes wide with fear. Sarah clutched the wooden figurine, its surface now warm to the touch. "We need to leave," Mark whispered urgently. "Now." But as they scrambled to pack up their equipment, Sarah realized with growing horror that they were 2 people short. "Where are Tom and Aisha?" A frantic search of the camp yielded no results. It was as if they had vanished into thin air, just like the colonists centuries before. As panic set in, Sarah caught a glimpse of movement in the trees. For a split second, she saw them, eyes glowing in the darkness, attached to shapes that defied description. Ancient, hungry, and very much alive. The team fled into the night, leaving behind their equipment and the secrets of the lost colony. But as they ran, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. Whatever had taken the colonists had awakened, and history was about to repeat itself. In the days that followed, search parties would comb the forest, finding no trace of the archaeological team. The site, when finally located, would be eerily undisturbed, tents still standing, artifacts laid out for examination. But of the researchers themselves, there would be no sign. And deep in the woods, hidden from prying eyes, an ancient evil stirred, ready to claim its next victims. The ghost ship. The luxury cruise ship Elysium's Dream was the epitome of opulence, offering its passengers a journey through the breathtaking landscapes of Alaska. With its sleek design and state-of-the-art amenities, it was the perfect getaway for those seeking adventure and relaxation. On board were over 500 passengers and a crew of 200, all eager to experience the untouched beauty of the Alaskan wilderness. As the ship sailed through the icy waters, the passengers enjoyed fine dining, entertainment, and breathtaking views. The ship's captain, a seasoned sailor with years of experience, had navigated these waters many times before. He knew every hidden cove and every treacherous reef, and he was confident in his ability to ensure a safe and enjoyable voyage for all on board. But on the fifth night of the voyage, disaster struck. A distress signal was sent out, and then all communication ceased. The ship's last transmission was a garbled message, barely intelligible, but it spoke of something ominous lurking in the darkness. The words were fragmented and unclear, but they sent a chill down the spines of those who heard them. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately, racing against time to reach the stricken vessel. The U.S. Coast Guard and local authorities worked together, mobilizing ships and aircraft to scour the waters for any sign of the Elysium's Dream. But as they approached the area where the ship was last seen, they were met with an eerie silence. The ship was adrift, its engines still running, but there was no sign of life on board. The passengers and crew had vanished, leaving behind only their belongings and a series of cryptic messages scrawled on the walls. The messages were chilling, hinting at a supernatural force that had claimed everyone on board. They spoke of shadows that moved, of eyes that watched from the darkness, and of an unending journey into the void. The rescue teams were baffled, unable to explain what had happened to the people on the ship. They searched every inch of the vessel, but there was no sign of struggle or violence. It was as if the passengers and crew had simply disappeared into thin air. As news of the disappearance spread, theories began to emerge. Some speculated about a catastrophic event, such as a massive storm or a structural failure of the ship. Others believed it was the work of a malevolent entity, something that had been awakened by the ship's presence in these remote waters. A team of investigators was assembled to unravel the mystery. They boarded the ship, searching for any clues that might explain the disappearance. The team was led by Captain James, a seasoned sailor with years of experience. He had seen his share of mysteries, but nothing could have prepared him for this. As they explored the ship, they found more messages, each one more ominous than the last. The messages were written in a variety of languages, from English to Spanish, and even some that no one could decipher. They seemed to be a mix of warnings and pleas for help, but they offered no clear explanation of what had happened. "This is not of this world," one message read. "We are not alone," another warned. Captain James realized that they were dealing with something beyond human understanding. The messages seemed to point to a supernatural force, one that had been awakened by the ship's presence in these remote waters. As the investigation continued, strange occurrences began to plague the team. Equipment would malfunction, and some members reported seeing shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their vision. It became clear that they were not alone on the ship. One night, as Captain James stood on the deck, he felt an icy breeze brush against his skin. He turned to see a figure standing at the rail, looking out into the darkness. It was one of his team members, but there was something wrong about him. His eyes seemed to be black as coal, and his skin was deathly pale. "Who are you?" Captain James demanded, but there was no response. The figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Captain James realized then that they had to leave the ship. Whatever had taken the passengers and crew was still on board, waiting for its next victims. The team quickly gathered their belongings and prepared to depart. As they sailed away from the Elysium's dream, they couldn't help but look back. The ship remained adrift, a ghostly presence haunting the Alaskan waters. Years later, the mystery of the Elysium's dream would become a legend, a cautionary tale told to sailors and travelers alike. It was a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, and that sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction. The ship was never seen again, but the messages it left behind continued to haunt those who had investigated its disappearance. They became a part of maritime folklore, a chilling echo of a voyage that had ended in horror. And so, the story of the Elysium's dream lived on, a testament to the enduring power of mystery and the unexplained. It was a reminder that even in the age of advanced technology, there are still forces beyond our understanding, waiting in the shadows to claim their next victims. As for Captain James and his team, they never spoke of what they experienced on that ship. They knew that some secrets were better left unspoken, and that the truth about the Elysium's dream was one of them. But on quiet nights, when the wind was calm and the stars were bright, they would sometimes hear a faint whisper on the wind. It was a voice, distant and haunting, calling out from the depths of the ocean. "We are not alone," it whispered. And in that moment, they knew that they were not alone. The mystery of the Elysium's dream would haunt them forever, a reminder of the horrors that lurked in the darkness, waiting to strike. In the years that followed, the legend of the Elysium's dream grew. It became a cautionary tale, told around campfires and in hushed whispers. It was a reminder that some places are better left unexplored, and that some mysteries are better left unsolved. But for those who had been on the ship, the memory of that fateful night would never fade. They had seen the unknown, and it had seen them. And in that moment, they knew that they would never be the same again. The story of the Elysium's dream became a part of history, a reminder of the power of the unknown. It was a tale of horror and mystery, of a voyage that had ended in tragedy, and it would haunt the dreams of sailors and travelers for generations to come. In the end, the mystery of the Elysium's dream remained unsolved. The ship was never found, and the fate of its passengers and crew remained a secret. But the legend lived on, a testament to the enduring power of mystery and the unexplained. And so, the story of the Elysium's dream continued to captivate and terrify, a reminder that even in the modern age, there are still forces beyond our understanding, waiting in the shadows to claim their next victims. The Midnight Runner. In the sleepy town of Willow Creek, nestled in the heart of rural America, a sense of unease settled over its residents like a shroud. It started with small, seemingly insignificant events. Children reported sleepwalking more frequently than usual, and parents began to notice a pattern. These weren't just ordinary sleepwalking episodes. The children would often be found miles away from home with no memory of how they got there. But it wasn't until the disappearances began that panic truly set in. Children would vanish in the dead of night, leaving behind only the faintest hint of their presence. A trail of footprints leading into the woods, a discarded toy, or a whisper of a voice caught on a security camera. For Sarah Jenkins, the nightmare became all too real when her 7-year-old son, Ethan, disappeared. Desperate and driven by a mother's instinct, Sarah set out to uncover the truth behind the vanishings. She began by installing surveillance cameras around her home and in the neighborhood, hoping to catch a glimpse of what might be happening. The first few nights yielded nothing but the occasional stray animal or curious neighbor. But then, on the 4th night, the the cameras captured something that made Sarah's blood run cold. A shadowy figure, indistinct and menacing, was seen lurking around the homes of the missing children. It moved with an unnatural gait, as if it didn't quite belong in the world of the living. Determined to learn more, Sarah started to investigate the town's history. She spoke to the elderly residents, pored over old records, and explored the long-abandoned buildings on the outskirts of town. It was there, in the dusty archives of the local library, that she stumbled upon a cryptic entry in an ancient diary. The diary belonged to one of the town's founders, a man named Silas Blackwood. As Sarah read through the yellowed pages, she discovered a chilling revelation. Blackwood and his fellow founders had made a pact with a mysterious entity, trading prosperity and protection for an unspeakable price. The entity, known only as the Nightwalker, was said to roam the shadows, claiming children as its own in exchange for the town's safety and success. Sarah realized that the sleepwalking children were not just victims of circumstance. They were being lured away by the Nightwalker. The figure she had seen on the surveillance footage was its servant, tasked with guiding the children into the darkness. With this newfound understanding, Sarah became more determined than ever to find Ethan and bring him home. She began to set traps, using herself as bait, hoping to lure the Nightwalker into the open. But as she delved deeper into the mystery, she realized that she was not alone in her quest. A group of townsfolk, equally desperate to save their children, had been secretly working together to uncover the truth. Together, they formed a plan to confront the Nightwalker and break the pact that had haunted their town for generations. The night of the confrontation arrived, and the group set out into the woods, armed with nothing but flashlights and a fierce determination. As they walked, the trees seemed to close in around them, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. Suddenly, the Nightwalker appeared before them. It was a figure unlike any they had ever seen, tall, imposing, and shrouded in darkness. But as they looked into its eyes, they saw something unexpected. A deep sadness, a longing for freedom from its eternal duty. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "We know about the pact. We want to break it." The Nightwalker regarded her for a moment before speaking in a voice that was both ancient and eternal. "You do not understand what you ask. The pact has kept your town safe for centuries. Without it, you will be vulnerable to all manner of dangers." But Sarah was resolute. "We would rather face those dangers than lose our children to the shadows." With a nod, the Nightwalker vanished, leaving behind a faint whisper, "The pact is broken. May your town find peace." In the days that followed, the disappearances ceased. The children who had been taken were returned, though they remembered nothing of their time away. Ethan came back to Sarah, safe and sound, with only a faint scar on his hand as a reminder of his journey. As for the town of Willow Creek, it began to heal. The residents came together, rebuilding their community on a foundation of truth and courage. And though the memory of the Nightwalker lingered, it was no longer a source of fear, but a reminder of the strength that lay within them. In the end, Sarah realized that sometimes the greatest horrors are not the monsters that lurk in the shadows, but the secrets we keep from ourselves. And it is only by facing those secrets that we can truly find peace. The Plague of Vermin. As we stepped into our newly purchased historic townhouse, we couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and pride. The house was a beautiful relic of the past, its stone facade weathered to a soft gray that seemed to blend seamlessly into the surrounding architecture. We had been friends since college, and this was our chance to start a new chapter together, to create memories that would last a lifetime. The first few days were a whirlwind of activity as we unpacked and settled in. We planned a housewarming party, inviting friends and family to join us in our new home. But as the night of the party approached, we began to notice something strange. At first, it was just a few stray insects, ants crawling across the countertops, flies buzzing around the trash cans. We dismissed it as a minor infestation, something that could be easily dealt with. But as the days passed, the problem grew more severe. Rats began to appear, scurrying across the floors and leaving behind trails of droppings. We set traps and called exterminators, but nothing seemed to work. The infestation was relentless, as if the vermin were being driven by some unseen force. As the pests multiplied, so did the diseases they carried. We started to fall ill one by one, each of us succumbing to a different ailment. Fever, nausea, and fatigue became our constant companions, and paranoia began to set in. We were trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape the plague of vermin that had taken over our home. And then we discovered the truth. The house had once been owned by a pest control magnate, a man named Malcolm, who had made his fortune by experimenting on animals. He had conducted unethical tests, pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in the name of science. But his obsession had come at a terrible cost. Malcolm's spirit still lingered in the house, his restless energy commanding the creatures to drive out any inhabitants. We were not just fighting an infestation, we were fighting a malevolent force that seemed determined to destroy us. As we delved deeper into the mystery, we found evidence of Malcolm's experiments. Hidden rooms deep in the basement contained old equipment and journals detailing his twisted work. The creatures, it seemed, were not just pests, they were his minions, driven by a dark and ancient power. We tried to flee, to leave the house and its horrors behind. But it was too late. The infestation had spread, consuming everything in its path. We were trapped, caught in a cycle of fear and despair from which we could not escape. And then, one by one, we began to vanish. The house seemed to be swallowing us whole, its walls closing in like a living entity. The last thing I remember is the sound of scurrying feet, the feeling of cold breath on the back of my neck. When I came to, I was alone in the house, the only sound the creaking of the old wooden beams. The vermin were gone, but I knew that I was not alone. Malcolm's spirit still lingered, watching and waiting. I stumbled out into the night, determined to escape the house and its dark history. But as I looked back, I saw the townhouse standing tall, its windows staring out like empty eyes. And I knew that I would never be free from the plague of vermin, that the house would always be there, waiting for me. As I look back on that experience, I realized that the house was never just a home. It was a prison, designed to trap its inhabitants in a never-ending cycle of fear and despair. And now I am left with the haunting question: what secrets do the old houses hold, and when will they come for us again? The days that followed were a blur. I tried to move on, to leave the house and its horrors behind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that Malcolm's spirit was still out there waiting for me. And then one night, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a simple text: "You will never be free." I knew then that I was doomed. The house had claimed me, and I would soon join the others in their eternal torment. As I write these final words, I am alone in a dark room, the shadows closing in around me like a shroud. I know that soon I will be gone, consumed by the horror that lurks in that haunted townhouse. And when I am, the world will forget me, leaving behind only the faintest hint of my existence. But I hope that someone will find this story, will read it, and understand the terror that lies hidden in the forgotten places of our world. For in those houses, time has forgotten nothing, and the secrets that lie hidden will haunt us forever. The Shadows of Oakwood. I still remember the day we moved into Oakwood, our new home in the suburbs. It was a beautiful summer morning, with the sun shining brightly and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the tall oak trees that lined our street. My parents were beaming with excitement as they unlocked the front door, revealing a spacious living room with high ceilings and large windows that let in plenty of natural light. My younger brother, Max, and I exchanged a look of excitement, eager to explore our new surroundings. As we began to unpack, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It wasn't just the usual stress of moving to a new place. There was something about the house that felt off. I brushed it off as nerves, focusing instead on making our new home feel like our own. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We settled into our routines, made new friends at school, and started to explore the neighborhood. But as time passed, strange things began to happen. Doors would slam shut on their own, and I would hear whispers in the night faint but unmistakable. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but as the occurrences grew more frequent and intense, I realized that something was amiss. One evening, while rummaging through the attic, I stumbled upon an old trunk hidden away in a corner. It was locked, but I managed to pick the rusted lock after a few minutes of fiddling with it. Inside, I found a collection of old photographs and newspaper clippings. They were all about a family that had lived in our house decades ago, the Smiths. As I flipped through the clippings, I discovered that the Smiths had experienced a series of tragic events. Their young daughter, Emily, had died under mysterious circumstances, and shortly after, the family had vanished. The house had been abandoned for years until it was sold to a new family, who also reported strange occurrences before leaving abruptly. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that our house had a dark history. I decided to keep my findings to myself, not wanting to worry my family. But as the strange events continued, I knew I had to do something. I began to research the history of our house, hoping to find some explanation for the strange happenings. I spent hours in the local library, poring over old records and talking to neighbors who had lived in the area for years. They spoke of the Smiths in hushed tones, as if they were afraid of being overheard. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Jenkins, shared a particularly chilling story. She had been a friend of the Smiths and remembered the night Emily died. According to Mrs. Jenkins, Emily's spirit had been seen in the house, and many believed that she was responsible for the strange occurrences. I didn't know what to believe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in our home. I started to notice small things, doors opening by themselves, objects moving on their own, and the sound of a child's laughter echoing through the halls at night. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my room. They were light, as if someone was trying not to be heard. I got out of bed and followed the sound to the living room. That's when I saw her, Emily, standing by the window, staring out into the night. She turned to me, and for a moment, our eyes met. I felt a surge of fear, but also a deep sadness. She vanished into thin air, leaving me shaken. The next morning, I told my parents everything. They were skeptical at first, but as I showed them the photographs and clippings, they began to realize that something was indeed wrong. We decided to seek help from a local paranormal investigator, hoping to find some peace in our home. The investigator, a kind but firm woman named Dr. Lee, came to our house armed with equipment and a wealth of knowledge. She set up cameras and audio recorders, determined to capture evidence of the paranormal activity. Over the next few days, Dr. Lee monitored the equipment, and what she found was chilling. There were recordings of a child's voice, whispering and laughing, and photographs of a shadowy figure standing in our living room. Lee explained that Emily's spirit was trapped between worlds, unable to move on due to the tragic circumstances of her death. She suggested that we perform a ritual to help Emily find peace, to release her from our home and allow her to rest. We agreed, and Dr. Lee guided us through the ritual. We lit candles, recited prayers, and left offerings for Emily. As we finished, the air in the house seemed to shift. The shadows receded, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The strange occurrences stopped, and our home felt like our own again. But as I looked out the window, I couldn't help but wonder if Emily had truly found peace, or if she was still watching over us, waiting for us to understand her story. As the seasons passed, our family grew closer, bound by the shared experience of facing the unknown together. We learned that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are not monsters or ghosts, but the secrets and stories that our homes hold. And sometimes all it takes is a little courage and understanding to set them free. The Shadows of Willow Creek. I've lived in Willow Creek my entire life, and until recently, it was a place where time seemed to stand still. Nestled deep in the heart of rural America, our town was a haven of tranquility, where everyone knew everyone, and the most exciting event was the annual summer fair. But that all changed when the disappearances started. At first, it was just whispers. A child would go missing for a few hours, only to be found playing in the woods or hiding in an old barn. But as the weeks went by, the disappearances became more frequent and more sinister. People would vanish in the dead of night, leaving behind only the faintest hint of their existence. A forgotten shoe, a torn piece of fabric caught in a bush, or the eerie feeling that someone had been watching from the shadows. I was 17 when it began, and like everyone else, I was both terrified and fascinated. The police were baffled, and the town was gripped by fear. My friends and I would huddle together at night, sharing stories of ghostly apparitions and ancient curses, trying to make sense of the inexplicable. My name is Emily, and I've always been drawn to the unknown. As a child, I would spend hours exploring the woods, imagining worlds beyond our small town. But nothing could have prepared me for the horror that was unfolding. The first person to disappear was Mrs. Jenkins, our elderly neighbor. She was a kind soul who always had a warm smile and a plate of fresh cookies for us kids. One morning, her house was found empty, the front door wide open and her rocking chair still swaying gently in the breeze. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. As the days turned into weeks, more people disappeared. There was Jake, the star quarterback, who left behind his car parked by the old oak tree in the town square. Then there was Sarah, a shy girl from my class, who vanished during a family outing to the nearby lake. Each disappearance was more baffling than the last, with no signs of struggle or foul play. The town was in chaos. Parents kept their children indoors, and the streets were empty by nightfall. But I couldn't stay inside. I felt an overwhelming urge to uncover the truth behind these disappearances. I began sneaking out at night, exploring the woods and abandoned houses, searching for any clue that might lead me to the missing people. One night I stumbled upon an old, dilapidated mansion on the outskirts of town. It had been abandoned for decades, its grandeur and beauty slowly being consumed by nature. I had heard stories about this place, how it was once the home of a reclusive millionaire who had died under mysterious circumstances. The locals avoided it, whispering tales of curses and evil spirits. As I approached the mansion, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air seemed to thicken, and the trees around me seemed to lean in, as if they were trying to listen. I pushed open the creaking front door and stepped inside. The interior was musty and dark, cobwebs clinging to the chandeliers like macabre tapestries. I fumbled for my flashlight and turned it on, casting a weak beam of light through the dusty halls. Every step echoed, making me feel like an intruder in a place that didn't want me there. I explored room after room, finding nothing but decay and neglect. But then I stumbled upon a door hidden behind a tattered curtain. It was locked, but I managed to pick the rusted lock after a few minutes of fiddling with it. Inside, I found a room filled with old photographs and newspaper clippings. They were all about the people who had disappeared, including Mrs. Jenkins and Jake. There were also articles about the town's history, mentioning an ancient ritual that had been performed in these very woods centuries ago. The ritual was said to summon a being from another realm, a being that fed on fear and human souls. Suddenly, the room seemed to grow colder. I felt eyes upon me, and the shadows around me began to twist and writhe like living things. I knew I had to leave, but as I turned to exit, I heard a faint whisper in my ear. "Emily, don't look back." I spun around, but there was no one there. The whisper seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the walls. Panic set in, and I ran out of the mansion, not stopping until I was back in my bedroom, gasping for breath. The next morning, I decided to share my findings with the police. But when I arrived at the station, I found it empty. The officers were all out searching for another missing person. My best friend, Alex. I knew then that I had to act fast. I gathered a few trusted friends, and together, we set out to uncover the truth. We scoured the woods, searching for any sign of Alex or the others. But as night began to fall, we realized we were not alone. We heard footsteps behind us, heavy and deliberate. We tried to run, but the woods seemed to shift and twist, making it impossible to find our way back. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until we could feel the ground shaking beneath our feet. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying in my bed, the sun streaming through the window. It was as if the whole ordeal had been a dream. But as I sat up, I noticed something strange. On my bedside table, there was a photograph of Alex, with a note scribbled on the back. "Don't look back." I knew then that I had to confront whatever evil was plaguing our town. I couldn't just sit back and wait for it to come for me. I began to research the ancient ritual, hoping to find a way to stop it. Days turned into weeks, and the disappearances continued, but I refused to give up. I spent every waking moment studying the ritual, trying to understand how to reverse its effects. And then, one night, I stumbled upon an ancient text that spoke of a counter-curse. It required me to gather specific items from the woods and perform a ritual of my own, one that would banish the entity back to its realm. I knew it was a risk, but I had no other choice. I gathered my friends, and together we set out to perform the counter-curse. We lit candles, recited ancient incantations, and burned the items we had collected. As we finished the ritual, the air around us began to shift. The shadows seemed to recoil, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure in the distance, a figure that was watching us with cold, calculating eyes. And then it vanished. The next morning, the town was quiet. The disappearances had stopped, and a sense of peace settled over Willow Creek once again. But as I walked through the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I looked back, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadowy figure standing just beyond the trees. But when I turned to look again, it was gone. I realized then that some secrets are better left unspoken, and some mysteries are too terrifying to confront. But I also knew that I had saved my town, even if it meant living with the knowledge of what lurks in the shadows. As I walked back home, the sun setting behind me, I couldn't help but wonder, what other secrets does Willow Creek hold? And when will they come for us again? The town that time forgot. Journalist Emily Taylor had always been fascinated by the mysteries of abandoned towns. Her latest project was to explore a series of ghost towns across America, each with its own unique story of sudden abandonment. From the mining towns of the West to the rural villages of the East, Emily was determined to uncover the truth behind these eerie places. Her journey took her to towns like Bodie, California, where the remnants of a once thriving gold rush community stood frozen in time, and Bannack, Montana, infamous for its violent past and ghostly legends. But it was in a small, forgotten town in the Midwest that Emily stumbled upon something truly inexplicable. The town, named Willowdale, had been abandoned in the early 1970s. The official story was that the residents had left due to economic hardship, but as Emily delved deeper, she found hints of a more sinister truth. In the local library, she discovered a collection of diaries and photographs belonging to the townspeople. The entries spoke of strange occurrences and an unshakable feeling of being watched. As Emily read through the diaries, she began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The photographs showed families and children, smiling and happy, but there was something unsettling about them. It was as if they were trying to convey a message, a warning that something was terribly wrong. One entry in particular caught her attention. It was from a young girl named Sarah, who wrote about seeing shadowy figures lurking in the woods. She described them as tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to burn with an otherworldly intensity. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She started to notice strange things around her. Doors creaking open, shadows moving in the corner of her eye. It was as if the entity that had consumed the townspeople was now watching her. Determined to uncover more, Emily decided to stay in Willowdale for a few more days. She set up her equipment in the old town hall, hoping to capture some evidence of the paranormal activity. But as night fell, she realized that she was truly alone. The darkness seemed to press in around her, and Emily felt her grip on reality begin to slip. She started to see things, figures moving in the shadows, eyes glowing in the dark. It was then that she understood the horrifying truth. The townspeople hadn't left, they had been erased from existence. As the night wore on, Emily's world began to unravel. She found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about reality. The entity, whatever it was, seemed to be playing with her, manipulating her perceptions and blurring the lines between truth and fiction. In a desperate bid to escape, Emily packed her bags and fled Willowdale. But as she drove away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. The entity was still out there, watching her, waiting for its next victim. Emily's investigation had uncovered a dark secret, one that threatened to consume her. She realized that some mysteries were better left unsolved, and that sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction. In the end, Emily's story was never published. She disappeared shortly after leaving Willowdale, leaving behind only her notes and a cryptic message: "I am not alone." The town of Willowdale remained a mystery, a place where time seemed to have forgotten its inhabitants. But for those who dared to venture near, the whispers of the past lingered, a haunting reminder of the horrors that lay just beyond the edge of reality. Years later, a group of brave explorers decided to visit Willowdale, hoping to uncover the truth behind Emily's disappearance. They found her notes scattered across the town hall, along with a series of photographs showing the same shadowy figures she had described. As they explored the town, they began to feel the same sense of unease that Emily had experienced. It was as if they were being watched, manipulated by an unseen force. The group consisted of 5 friends, all seasoned adventurers with a passion for the paranormal. They had explored countless haunted locations, but nothing could have prepared them for Willowdale. As they delved deeper into the town, they discovered more evidence of the strange occurrences that had driven the residents away. They found newspaper clippings about unexplained events and strange sightings, all hinting at a supernatural presence. But it was the photographs that truly unsettled them. They showed the townspeople going about their daily lives, but there was something off about them. It was as if they were trapped in a never-ending loop, reliving the same moments over and over. One of the explorers, a young woman named Rachel, began to feel a strange connection to the photographs. She saw herself in the faces of the townspeople, as if she were somehow linked to them. As the night wore on, the group started to experience strange occurrences. Equipment would malfunction, and they would hear whispers in the darkness. It was then that they realized they were not alone in Willowdale. The entity, whatever it was still present, watching them, waiting for them to make a wrong move. The group tried to leave, but they found that their cars wouldn't start. They were trapped at the mercy of the entity. In the end, they too disappeared, leaving behind only their equipment and a chilling message: "We are not alone." And so the legend of Willowdale lived on, a cautionary tale about the dangers of meddling with forces beyond our understanding. It was a reminder that some secrets are better left unspoken, and that sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction. In the heart of America, there were places where time seemed to stand still, where the past lingered in the shadows, waiting to claim its next victims. Willowdale was one such place, a town that time had forgotten, but the darkness remembered all too well. Years later, a lone traveler stumbled upon Willowdale, drawn by the rumors of its dark past. He was a brave soul, eager to uncover the truth behind the town's abandonment. But as he walked through the empty streets, he felt the same sense of unease that Emily and the explorers had experienced. He saw the photographs, the diaries, and the cryptic messages. He realized that Willowdale was not just a ghost town. It was a portal to another dimension, a realm where time had no meaning. The traveler tried to leave, but he found himself trapped in a never-ending loop. He relived the same moments over and over, unable to escape the town's grasp. And so the cycle continued. Willowdale remained a mystery, a place where time forgot its inhabitants, but the darkness remembered all too well. It was a reminder that some secrets are better left unspoken, and that sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction. In the end, the story of Willowdale became a legend, a cautionary tale told around campfires and in hushed whispers. It was a reminder that some places are better left unexplored, and that the past is sometimes better left buried. But for those who dared to venture near, the whispers of the past lingered, a haunting reminder of the horrors that lay just beyond the edge of reality. And in the darkness, the entity waited, watching and waiting for its next victim. The uninvited tenant. As we stepped out of the realtor's car and onto the cracked sidewalk, my wife Sarah and I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and trepidation. The house before us was a charming historic gem, its wooden facade weathered to a soft gray that seemed to glow in the fading light of day. We had been searching for the perfect home for months, and this small town in the Midwest seemed like the ideal place to start our new life. The realtor, a friendly woman named Mrs. Jenkins, handed us the keys with a warm smile. "Welcome to your new home," she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I think you'll find it's just what you're looking for." As we entered the house, we were struck by its spaciousness and character. The high ceilings, the large windows, and the creaking wooden floors all seemed to whisper stories of the past. We spent the first few days unpacking and settling in, feeling more and more at home with each passing hour. But as the nights began to fall, we started to notice strange things. Items would be misplaced, and unfamiliar noises could be heard in the darkness. At first, we dismissed it as the usual creaks and groans of an old house. But as the occurrences grew more frequent and intense, we realized that something was amiss. One night, as I was working in my study, I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye. I turned, but there was no one there. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Sarah experienced similar incidents. She would find her clothes rearranged in the closet, and sometimes she would hear whispers in the night. We tried to brush it off as nerves, but deep down, we knew that something was wrong. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, we began to investigate. We scoured the house from top to bottom, searching for any sign of what might be causing these strange occurrences. And then, one day, we stumbled upon a hidden room in the attic. The room was small, with walls lined with old books and a single chair sitting in the center. But it was the journal lying open on a small table that caught our attention. The entries were from a man named Edward, who had lived in the house decades ago. As we read through the journal, we discovered that Edward had been driven mad by isolation. He had become convinced that the house was his, and that anyone else who lived there was an intruder. The final entry was the most chilling. "I will never leave. This house is mine, and I will make sure that no one else ever claims it." We realized then that Edward was still in the house, his spirit trapped by his own madness. We tried to leave, to escape the uninvited tenant who seemed to be watching us from the shadows. But as we turned to go, we heard a voice. "You shouldn't be here," it whispered, the sound echoing through the attic like a cold breeze. We spun around, but there was no one in sight. The voice seemed to come from all around us, filling the room with an unspeakable horror. As we fled the attic, we knew that we had to confront Edward. We couldn't just leave. We had to make him understand that the house was ours now. But as we descended into the darkness of the night, we realized that we were not alone. Edward was waiting for us, his presence filling the house with an unshakable fear. We tried to reason with him, to explain that we meant no harm, but he would not listen. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. Sarah was beside me, her eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" she whispered. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. As we stumbled to our feet, we realized that we had to leave. We couldn't stay in a house that was haunted by a madman's spirit. But as we turned to flee, we saw Edward standing in the doorway, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "You will never leave," he whispered, his voice echoing through the house like a curse. And then, everything went black once more. When I came to, I was alone in the house. Sarah was gone, and I was left with only the echoes of Edward's madness. I knew then that I had to escape, to leave the house and its uninvited tenant behind. But as I stumbled out into the night, I realized that I was not alone. Edward was with me, his presence haunting me like a specter. And I knew that I would never be free from the horror that lurked in that charming, historic house. As I look back on that night, I realized that the house was never ours. It was always Edward's, and we were just intruders in his twisted world. And now, I am left with the haunting question: What secrets do the old houses hold, and when will they come for us again? The days that followed were a blur. I searched for Sarah, but she was nowhere to be found. I knew then that she had been taken by Edward, trapped in his madness forever. I tried to move on, to leave the house and its horrors behind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that Edward was still out there, waiting for me. And then, one night, I received a package in the mail. Inside, I found a journal, its pages filled with Sarah's handwriting. The entries spoke of her life in the house, of how she had become trapped in Edward's world. The final entry was the most chilling. "I am not alone. Edward is with me, and we will never let you go." I knew then that I was doomed. The house had claimed me, and I would soon join Sarah and Edward in their twisted realm. As I write these final words, I am alone in a motel room, the shadows closing in around me like a shroud. I know that soon I will be gone, consumed by the horror that lurks in that charming, historic house. And when I am, the world will forget me, leaving behind only the faintest hint of my existence. But I hope that someone will find this story, will read it, and understand the terror that lies hidden in the forgotten places of our world. For in those houses, time has forgotten nothing, and the secrets that lie hidden will haunt us forever. The Vanishing Builder. As I stepped into my new condo, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The building was sleek and modern, its glass facade reflecting the vibrant cityscape outside. I had been searching for the perfect place to call home, and this seemed like the ideal spot. But as I began to explore my new surroundings, I noticed something strange. Doors led to nowhere, rooms were missing from the floor plan, and staircases seemed to shift and twist like a maze. At first I dismissed it as a quirk of modern architecture, but as the days passed, I realized that something was amiss. I wasn't alone in my observations. Neighbors would whisper about similar experiences, finding themselves lost in the building's labyrinthine corridors or stumbling upon rooms that seemed to appear out of nowhere. And then there were the disappearances. People would vanish without warning, leaving behind only the faintest hint of their existence. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I began to investigate. I scoured the building's blueprints, looking for any clue that might explain the strange occurrences. And then I stumbled upon a hidden room deep in the basement. Inside, I found a series of cryptic symbols etched into the walls. They seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if they were alive and watching me. I knew then that I had to uncover the truth behind the building's design. I started by researching the architect who had designed the building. His name was Alexander, a brilliant but reclusive man who had been known for his innovative and sometimes bizarre designs. But as I delved deeper into his past, I discovered a darker side to his work. Alexander had been fascinated by dark rituals, believing that they could be embedded into the very structure of a building. He had spent years studying ancient texts and practicing forbidden arts, convinced that he could create a space that was alive and sentient. And then it clicked. The building was not just a collection of steel and concrete, it was a living entity, designed to consume its inhabitants. The doors that led nowhere, the rooms that shifted and twisted, these were all part of Alexander's twisted design. As I explored the building further, I realized that I was not alone. The architect's ghost was still present, watching and waiting. I could feel his presence, a cold and calculating energy that seemed to seep into every pore of my being. I knew then that I had to escape, to leave the building and its dark rituals behind. But as I turned to flee, I realized that it was too late. The building had already claimed me, drawing me into its labyrinthine corridors like a moth to a flame. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. The building was quiet, the only sound the creaking of its metal beams. I stumbled to my feet, determined to uncover the truth behind Alexander's dark rituals. As I delved deeper into the mystery, I discovered that the building was not just a structure, it was a prison, designed to trap its inhabitants in a never-ending cycle of fear and confusion. And I was not alone. There were others who had been consumed by the building's dark energy. I knew then that I had to find a way out, to escape the building's grasp before it was too late. But as I looked around, I realized that I was lost. The corridors seemed to shift and twist, leading me deeper into the heart of the building. And then, I saw it. A door that seemed to lead to nowhere. A door that pulsed with the same malevolent energy as the symbols in the hidden room. I knew then that I had to open it, to face whatever horror lay beyond. As I pushed the door open, I was met with a sight that chilled me to the bone. The room was filled with the missing residents, their faces twisted in agony as they were consumed by the building's dark energy. I knew then that I was doomed. The building had claimed me, and I would soon join the others in their eternal torment. And as I looked back, I saw Alexander's ghost standing in the doorway, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "You will never leave," he whispered, his voice echoing through the corridors like a curse. And then, everything went black once more. As I look back on that experience, I realized that the building was never just a structure. It was a living entity, designed to consume its inhabitants. And now I am left with the haunting question: what secrets do the buildings hold, and when will they come for us again? The days that followed were a blur. I tried to escape, to leave the building and its horrors behind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that Alexander's ghost was still out there, waiting for me. And then, one night, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a simple text: "You will never be free." I knew then that I was doomed. The building had claimed me, and I would soon join the others in their eternal torment. As I write these final words, I am alone in a dark room, the shadows closing in around me like a shroud. I know that soon I will be gone, consumed by the horror that lurks in that building. And when I am, the world will forget me, leaving behind only the faintest hint of my existence. But I hope that someone will find this story, will read it, and understand the terror that lies hidden in the forgotten places of our world. For in those buildings, time has forgotten nothing, and the secrets that lie hidden will haunt us forever. The vanishing flight. The sun was setting over the small airfield, casting a golden glow over the rows of aircraft. It was a typical day for aviation engineer Jack Harris and his crew, tasked with preparing an old Boeing 727 for a routine test flight. The aircraft, once a proud member of a major airline, had been retired and was now being refurbished for private use. Jack, a seasoned pilot with years of experience, had been hired to ensure the plane was airworthy. Alongside him were his trusted crew members, Mark, a skilled mechanic, and Emily, a young but talented navigator. As they worked, the airfield was quiet, with only a few other planes taking off and landing in the distance. The team was focused on their task, checking every system, every wire, and every bolt to ensure the aircraft was safe to fly. Jack had a reputation for being meticulous, and he intended to uphold it. The day of the test flight arrived, and Jack, Mark, and Emily were at the airfield early, eager to get underway. The Boeing 727, with its distinctive tri-jet design, stood ready on the tarmac. Jack performed the pre-flight checks, while Mark and Emily loaded the necessary equipment and supplies. The plan was simple: take off, fly a few circuits around the airfield, and then return to test the aircraft's systems. As they boarded the plane, Jack felt a sense of excitement mixed with a hint of nervousness. This was, after all, the first time the aircraft had been in the air for years. He took his seat in the cockpit, with Mark beside him and Emily in the navigator's seat behind. "Clear for takeoff," Jack said into the radio, his voice steady. "Roger that, Boeing 727. You are clear for takeoff," replied the air traffic controller. The engines roared to life as Jack advanced the throttles. The plane began to move, slowly at first, then picking up speed as it hurtled down the runway. Jack pulled back on the yoke, and the aircraft lifted off the ground, soaring into the sky. "Altitude 5,000 feet," Jack announced, his eyes scanning the instruments. Everything seemed normal. The engines were running smoothly, and the aircraft was responding well to the controls. Jack began to feel a sense of relief. This was going to be a routine flight after all. But then, without warning, everything changed. "Mark, we're losing communication," Jack said, with his brow furrowed in concern. Mark fiddled with the radio, trying to re-establish contact, but there was only static. "Try the transponder," Jack instructed. Mark flipped the switch, but the transponder remained dark. They were invisible to radar. "Emily, can you get a fix on our position?" Jack asked, his voice calm but urgent. Emily worked frantically, but the GPS was malfunctioning. They were alone, lost in the sky. Panic began to set in as the reality of their situation sank in. Jack tried to remain calm, thinking clearly about their next move. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that they were truly alone. Back on the ground, air traffic control realized something was wrong. The Boeing 727 had vanished from radar, and all attempts to contact the crew were met with silence. An extensive search operation was launched, involving multiple aircraft and ground teams. But despite the efforts, no sign of the plane or its occupants was found. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The search was eventually called off, leaving behind only unanswered questions. What had happened to Jack, Mark, and Emily? Had they crashed, or had they somehow managed to land safely in a remote area? The mystery of the vanishing flight captivated the nation. Speculation ran rampant, from theories of hijacking to suggestions of a catastrophic mechanical failure. But the truth remained elusive. Years passed, and the incident was all but forgotten. Then, one night, a strange radio transmission was picked up by a ham radio operator. The signal was weak and distorted, but the words were unmistakable. "This is Boeing 727. We are not alone." The transmission sent shockwaves through the aviation community. Could it be a hoax, or was it really a message from the missing crew? Over the next few weeks, more transmissions were received, each as cryptic and unsettling as the last. They spoke of darkness, of shadows that moved, and of an unending journey through the void. The transmissions were analyzed, but they offered no clues about the location or fate of the crew. They seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at the same time, echoing through the ether like whispers from beyond. A new investigation was launched, this time focusing on the mysterious transmissions. Experts in radio communication and cryptography were brought in to analyze the signals, hoping to glean some information about the crew's whereabouts. But the more they listened, the more they realized that these were not ordinary transmissions. They seemed to be coming from a place beyond the physical world, a realm where time and space were distorted. Theories emerged about parallel universes and alternate realities. Some believed that the Boeing 727 had somehow crossed into another dimension where the laws of physics no longer applied. As the investigation continued, the transmissions grew stronger, more frequent. They began to take on a haunting quality, as if the crew was trying to convey a message from beyond the grave. "This is Boeing 727. We are trapped. Forever." The words sent chills down the spines of those who heard them. What had happened to Jack, Mark, and Emily? Were they truly trapped in some kind of limbo, or was this all just a cruel hoax? The mystery of the vanishing flight became a legend, a cautionary tale told around campfires and in hushed whispers. It was a reminder that even in the age of advanced technology, there were still mysteries beyond our understanding. The Boeing 727 was never found, nor were its occupants. But the transmissions continued, a haunting reminder of the unknown. They became a part of aviation folklore, a chilling echo of a flight that had vanished into the void. And so, the story of the vanishing flight lived on, a testament to the enduring power of mystery and the unexplained. It was a reminder that sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction. Years later, on a quiet night, a lone radio operator sat hunched over his equipment, listening for any sign of life from beyond the horizon. Suddenly, a faint signal appeared on his screen. He leaned forward, his heart racing, as the words crackled through the speakers. "This is Boeing 727. We are still here." The operator's eyes widened in horror as he realized that some mysteries were better left unsolved. He quickly turned off the radio, the darkness outside seeming to press in around him. The vanishing flight had left behind more than just unanswered questions. It had left behind a haunting legacy that would haunt the skies forever. The Whispering Walls. As we drove down the winding country road, the trees seemed to close in around us, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted in the fading light. My wife, Emma, and I had been searching for the perfect escape from the city, a place where we could raise our children in peace and quiet. And when we saw the old stone house, nestled among the rolling hills and verdant forests, we knew we had found it. The house was quaint, its stone facade weathered to a soft gray that seemed to blend seamlessly into the landscape. The interior was cozy, with large fireplaces and wooden beams that seemed to whisper stories of the past. We fell in love with it instantly, envisioning lazy afternoons spent reading by the fire and long walks through the surrounding countryside. But as we settled into our new home, we began to notice something strange. Faint whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, speaking in an archaic language that none of us could understand. At first, we dismissed it as the usual creaks and groans of an old house, but as the whispers grew louder and more insistent, we realized that something was amiss. The whispers seemed to be influencing our thoughts and behaviors. Emma would find herself standing in front of the fireplace, staring into the flames as if mesmerized. Our children would play in the garden, their laughter and shouts echoing through the halls. But when we called them in for dinner, they would seem distant, as if their minds were elsewhere. I tried to investigate, to find the source of the whispers, but there was nothing. No hidden speakers, no strange devices. Just the walls, whispering their secrets to us in the dead of night. As the days passed, the whispers grew more urgent. We would hear them in our dreams, waking up with a start as if someone had spoken our names. We tried to ignore them, to drown them out with music or television, but they seemed to seep into every corner of our lives. Desperate to silence the voices, we decided to tear down the walls. We hired a contractor, and together we began to dismantle the old stone structure. But as we broke through to the other side, we discovered something that chilled us to the bone. Hidden chambers, tucked away behind the walls, contained the remains of previous occupants. They were old, their bones dry and brittle, but it was the expressions on their faces that haunted us. They seemed to be frozen in terror, as if they had heard the whispers too, and had been driven mad by them. We realized then that we were not the first to experience the whispers. The house had a dark history, a history of driving its occupants to the brink of madness, and we knew that we had to leave, to escape the whispers before it was too late. But as we packed our bags and prepared to flee, we heard the whispers one last time. They were loud and clear, speaking in a language that seemed to come from another world. "You will never leave," they whispered, the sound echoing through the halls like a curse. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. Emma was beside me, her eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" she whispered. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. As we stumbled to our feet, we realized that we were not alone. The whispers were still there, echoing through the halls like a chorus of the damned. And we knew that we would never be free from their grasp. The house had claimed us, drawing us into its dark and twisted world. And as we looked around, we saw that the walls were closing in, the stones seeming to shift and twist like living things. We were trapped, caught in a nightmare from which we could not awaken. And as the whispers grew louder, more insistent, we knew that we would soon join the others, frozen in terror, forever trapped in the whispering walls. As I look back on that experience, I realized that the house was never just a home. It was a prison, designed to trap its occupants in a never-ending cycle of fear and madness. And now I am left with the haunting question: what secrets do the old houses hold, and when will they come for us again? The days that followed were a blur. We tried to escape, to leave the house and its horrors behind. But we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the whispers were still out there, waiting for us. And then, one night, we received a message from an unknown number. It was a simple text: "You will never be free." We knew then that we were doomed. The house had claimed us, and we would soon join the others in their eternal torment. As I write these final words, I am alone in a dark room. the shadows closing in around me like a shroud. I know that soon I will be gone, consumed by the horror that lurks in those whispering walls. And when I am, the world will forget me, leaving behind only the faintest hint of my existence. But I hope that someone will find this story, will read it, and understand the terror that lies hidden in the forgotten places of our world. For in those houses, time has forgotten nothing, and the secrets that lie hidden will haunt us forever.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories every week. Have you got a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And remember, the darkness holds many secrets. Are you brave enough to uncover them? Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet nightmares.